I'm obviously State Senator Alex Padilla, joined today by Dr. Geoffrey G from Oceana. He's the California campaign director for this project we're working on today, as well as Danny Johnson, the powerful man with the blue robe, apron here, Taylor's Market co-owner and head butcher. But personally, I come to this issue from a unique perspective, I think. For well over a decade here, I've been involved with the American Diabetes Association, trying to do my part to improve the health of Californians and people throughout the nation in combating our obesity epidemic. You know, we hear from doctors, we hear from health professionals, we hear from nutritionists, two big recommendations: exercise more and eat healthier. And so that's why, if you recall, when I first joined the state senate, the very first bill I introduced called upon chain restaurants and both sort of fast food restaurants and sit-down restaurants to post nutritional information directly on their menus and on their menu boards, so that when people were eating out, they had the information they needed to make informed choices. And of course, if you talk to health professionals, how do we eat healthier? We're encouraged to eat more fruits and vegetables, and we're encouraged to eat more chicken and fish. So the incorporation of fish in our diet is not just one of taste, it is one of health. And indeed, consumers across the nation spend $80 billion a year on seafood. However, what we've come to learn is that consumers don't always get what they pay for. They don't always get what they order because seafood is not always accurately labeled. Consumers deserve to be served the fish that we order. Last year, the organization Oceana, the largest international ocean conservation and advocacy organization, released the results of a nationwide study on fish. Fish that was sampled at retail establishments such as restaurants and grocery stores across the country. The study included the counties of San Francisco, Monterey, Orange, and Los Angeles. And the study found that 58% of restaurants visited in Northern California sold mislabeled fish. The study found that 38% of all fish sampled were mislabeled in Northern California. 27% of grocery stores visited in Northern California sold mislabeled fish. And Southern California actually led the nation in mislabeling. 52% of fish sampled were labeled with incorrect, inaccurate names. Now, the mislabeling of seafood, or seafood fraud as we call it, can lead to the consumption of seafood that is not only unhealthy, but potentially dangerous. Certain species of fish can have unhealthy levels of mercury or can cause severe allergic reactions. And we often found that these unhealthy species were substituted for the healthy species that are being recommended. Additionally, shellfish can be illegally harvested from areas that have been deemed too polluted for commercial fishing. So on the one hand, we know that seafood is encouraged as part of a healthy lifestyle, and it's considered beneficial, for example, for pregnant women or women who are breastfeeding. They're encouraged to eat more salmon, rainbow trout, oysters, and striped bass. On the flip side, what's often inaccurately served are species that the Food and Drug Administration discourages. So, unfortunately, the Oceana study found that fish marketed as low mercury can actually be substituted for fish that was high in mercury. This bill, SB 1138, which we're announcing today, seeks to address this growing problem of seafood mislabeling. To better protect our health, our economy, and our oceans, it's essential that seafood be labeled correctly. It's a very simple principle. In life we don't always get what we pay for, but when it comes to seafood, we should. And honesty is always the best policy. This bill will crack down on seafood fraud by establishing clear guidelines for how retail establishments shall name species of fish using the Food and Drug Administration's seafood list. Let me turn it over now for maybe a more in-depth presentation on the report and its findings. Please welcome Dr. George Chester with Oceana.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. My name is Geoff Chester. I'm the California Campaign Director for Oceana, which is the largest international ocean conservation organization. I'm here to talk about seafood fraud, of which we have a national campaign, which quite honestly is basically when consumers are not given adequate information to make informed decisions about what exactly they are buying when they go to the seafood counter. This hurts not only California consumers, but also fishermen, the health of the ocean, and human health. Thank you, Senator Padilla, for your leadership in introducing this forward-thinking and long overdue legislation, Senate Bill 1138. Our Oceana's nationwide study basically went to over 1,200 samples looking in 21 states throughout the country from 2010 to 2012, which is basically the largest seafood DNA study that has occurred to date. What basically we did in the study is we went out and purchased a whole bunch of different types of seafood and then put that samples of each type of seafood inside a DNA vial and sent it over to a DNA lab in which they were able to tell us exactly and precisely what species the seafood actually was, and we were able to compare that to how the seafood was actually sold. California fared among the worst in the nation, having some of the highest mislabeling rates, greater than the national average. Nationally, over 1/3 of the seafood tested was mislabeled according to the Food and Drug Administration guidelines. Just today, a new study has come out showing that 20 to 32% of imported wild-caught seafood is coming from illegal, unregulated, and unreported fisheries. And what we saw in our DNA testing results is that sushi restaurants scored among the highest, with 74% of the sushi samples we tested being mislabeled. But the problem also occurred throughout grocery stores and other types of restaurants. A few quick examples of the types of mislabeling we saw and why it matters. In California, every single one of the snapper that we ordered was actually not snapper. Snapper is a species of fish that is grown or that lives in the Gulf of Mexico, and basically all of the snapper samples that we tested were not actually even from the snapper family at all. In terms of the health ramifications, the FDA recommends that women and children never eat certain species of fish due to mercury contamination, and specifically the effects of this mercury on the development of fetuses and very young children. Species like swordfish and sharks are actually examples of species that should never be eaten. Regarding sustainability, U.S. caught albacore tuna, in fact, is a very healthy and sustainable choice. Seafood Watch of the Monterey Bay Aquarium recommends that this is a sustainable and healthy option. However, 84% of the white tuna, which is supposed to be albacore tuna, was actually escolar, which causes serious digestive issues and actually gives a large part of the U.S. population diarrhea if eaten too much. And the FDA, in fact, recommends that no consumers actually eat it. And in fact, it is probably the most likely thing you are getting if you order white tuna at a sushi restaurant. So consumers are getting ripped off here, and consumers in California, we know, are paying more to get local, sustainable seafood that reward our responsible California fishermen for doing the right thing and fishing more responsibly. However, if you're paying more and instead you get Chinese farmed tilapia instead of something like a local wild-caught, line-caught rockfish, you could be paying 3 to 10 times too much for that product. And also the fishermen that are doing the right thing are not being rewarded in the marketplace for their responsible activities. Senate Bill 1138 ultimately requires retailers and restaurants to tell you exactly what species that you are buying. That is not currently a requirement in state law, and ultimately enables the existing consumer protection laws we have in place to be adequately enforced by wildlife and public health officials. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Danny Johnson, who is the co-owner and the butcher here at Taylor's Market, which is also a Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch partner business, and he's going to give us a little bit of a demonstration so you can tell exactly how difficult it might be to determine what's actually the stuff you're trying to buy versus the imposter fish.
Thank you, Jeff. So this is going to be a little interactive here for you guys. Here is an example of halibut. So I'm going to use Chris here to assist me from the B. Chris, can you tell me the difference between which one's Pacific and which one's California halibut?
Honestly, I have no idea.
Okay. No, that's fine. Just work with me here. This is California halibut. This is, or it's flounder. Pacific halibut, we just started. Alaskan halibut. This is a fresh product. This is a fresh product. Commonly, California halibut, when Pacific halibut is not fresh, is sold as Pacific Atlantic or Pacific Alaskan halibut. Then we have the salmon. Chris, wild or farmed? This is a farmed Verlasso salmon from Chile. This is a wild, first of the season king salmon, Columbia River. This just came in this morning. This season just started. Commonly it's sold, the farm salmon can be sold as wild salmon. There's a lot of mislabeling with that. And also these are both fresh products. The other part of the bill is talking about fresh and frozen. Correct. Then we have albacore tuna, which is right here, and this is the escalar. Another name for escalar. It's also sold on menus as Hawaiian butterfish or Hawaiian walu. Very rarely will you see it called escalar. People can type that in on their phone and it'll pop up talking about the gastric problems that it causes. So if it's sold as walu, it's not going to pop up maybe as much. And especially Hawaiian butterfish, which is a new term I just heard a couple weeks ago. And these are the examples that we have of how it would be cut into sashimi. That's a nice looking representation of white tuna, but actually it is escalar. Then this is the albacore tuna. It's going to be a little grayer, not quite as white. White is what people are looking for, how nice and bright it is.
And I just wanted to add in a few of the examples for why some of this stuff matters. For example, the difference between California halibut and Pacific halibut could mean the difference between ordering something on the green list from Seafood Watch versus something on the red list. We know that a lot of the California halibut comes from a fishery that Oceana has identified as one of the 9 dirty fisheries in the entire nation because of the bycatch or incidental catch of other fish. For every, for every 3 fish caught in this fishery, 2 fish are actually thrown away and wasted. Versus Pacific halibut, which is caught with bottom long lines, is thought to be a very sustainable seafood product and is on the Monterey Bay Aquarium's green list. Also, some of the salmon differences that you can see are that wild salmon is typically a very sustainable seafood. It is caught by California fishermen. It is a innately California product. Instead, farm salmon, what you might be getting instead, is known to often be higher in PCBs, which is a type of contaminant, and is also farmed in many ways that hurt the natural environment significantly due to escapes and chemical use, etc. And most of the farm salmon you'll get is actually the color comes from a dye, not the actual. It's not the actual true color of the fish. And again, the difference between escalar and albacore tuna is very important in the sense that, as you can see here, when you go to a sushi bar and you order this product, you're more often than not likely to be getting the escalar. You can see that the difference in the sashimi, it's a little bit whiter, it maybe look a little bit more appealing. Unfortunately, in terms of the after effects, may not be so pleasant for many people in the population, particularly people that are at-risk populations. And so it's not just that you may not be getting what you think you're getting. There are some serious ramifications both for the health of the ocean and the health of people.
So before we open up to questions, just want to conclude by saying clearly Oceana in the report has done a great job of illustrating the problem. What we're presenting here today is the solution, a solution that's good for consumers. It's good for the responsible businesses, such as Taylor's Market here that's been a participant in the Seafood Watch program. It's going to be good for our public health, and it's going to be good for the health of our oceans as well. So this solution is a win-win-win-win, if you will. So thank you, gentlemen, and with that, we'd be happy to entertain some questions.
How are you going to deal with, say a grocery store that may not know that they're not being what they say they're doing?
Right. So a two-part answer. The question is how to deal with a grocery store that may not necessarily know that what they're getting, what they're receiving, has been mislabeled from their supplier. So there's a whole sort of chain of custody, if you will. And the ultimate goal here is to have a national policy that accurately labels seafood from boat to plate. Did I get that right? From boat to plate. So until our federal government or Congress acts on a national policy, what we want to do is have state law, such as what Washington State did last year. They signed, not just passed a bill, but signed into law a law very much like what we're presenting here in California. So retailers know that they have to be on alert with their suppliers, and the suppliers will have to know they have to be on alert with the wholesalers they purchase from, and so on down the line. So the responsibility and the consequences follows that chain.
At what point does the fraud tend to happen? Given that so much seafood is coming imported from other countries, is it coming into the country already mislabeled, or does it tend to be the restaurateurs trying to dupe the public and switching out fish to save money?
You want to comment on that?
Sure.
So unfortunately, one of the things we're not able to study in terms of the seafood fraud that we detected was at what point in the supply chain this is actually happening. Now, ultimately, in response to the previous question, making sure that at the consumer-facing retail and restaurant end, that the requirement is there, enables the enforcement and ultimately requires and calls for the supply chain to be accountable. But we do know that oftentimes it may not be the restaurant that is at fault. They may not have been provided the accurate information from their suppliers. So a lot of money can be made in the seafood supply chain, either changing or withholding some of this critical information. But if at the end of the day, at the end of that supply chain, people are required to know exactly what species it is, that combined with some of these federal efforts, of which Oceana is heavily involved in at the national level, ultimately will provide a comprehensive solution to this problem.
So really quick, is some of this just chef ignorance in a way that they just might confuse fish as it is? I know there's some vernacular issues about certain fish that are sometimes claimed to be others. I mean, is this an education campaign as well for the chefs?
Definitely, there's a lot of education that is happening here. One of the problems that we see is a lot of times the acceptable market names that people have become accustomed to in the market aren't specific enough. And for example, that was the main issue we found with snapper. Snapper can be over a dozen different species of rockfish under the current California guidelines. And unfortunately, we think that the problem is caused by not only consumers but also businesses not asking enough questions and not demanding to actually know what it is that they're getting. And so by making sure that it's not just a market name that you have to say it's tuna, but you have to say it's yellowfin versus albacore tuna, that's going to give people information they know to make decisions that have big consequences for their health and the health of the ocean.
Right. So clearly we have options as to where to apply the policy pressure, if you will, or even the economic pressure for the proper labeling of seafood along the way. But the most important step is to protect the consumer from both the health and an economics perspective. So if through this legislation we put pressure on restaurants and grocery stores to put pressure on their suppliers, then so be it. And if those suppliers in turn put pressure on, all the way back to where and how the seafood is caught, ultimately what we're looking to do is protect consumers, protect our oceans, and protect the good players in our economy.
Is it easy for consumers to go along with it? Is there anything else we could do to tell the difference between taste, say,
So the question is, what else can consumers do to help here, help themselves, and help the education campaign? So who better to talk about it than our friends here at Taylor's, who've been part of Seafood Watch for a while and can tell you about their customer experience and satisfaction?
There's a couple points I can make to that. You have to trust the people you're doing business with, ask a lot of questions, and do some of the homework on your own. From a retailer standpoint, we had to do a lot of homework on our own. Talking about the red snapper that we brought up on this, years ago, before Oceana came out with this in 2010, we were selling it as red snapper because that's how it was being sold to us from a vendor. And we started doing some research and found out that it was all rock cod. That's when we changed our labeling and said, we started digging into this issue a little bit more. From a retail standpoint, as far as I know, everything that comes in on an invoice, it has to say country of origin, and it has to say if it was farmed or wild. Now, on a restaurant level, which we have a restaurant as well in this business, you can just say salmon. You can say wild salmon. You don't have to say it's farmed. You don't have to say it's wild. You can just put king salmon. You can put, tilapia. You don't have to say that it's farmed. Most tilapia is farmed. You can put catfish. You can put clams. Most clams are farmed. Very few wild clams around. You can just put clams on your menu. Do not have to label where it comes from or any of the origin. Does that help you out a little bit? Right. As a consumer, the consumer should ask at the restaurant level. If they can't give you the answer, you might not want to be at that restaurant.
Right. But we've seen consumer education campaigns make significant progress in a number of fronts, whether it's those who wish to look for organic products, for example, or the light fare menu at a number of different restaurants, things of that nature. So whenever there's a little logo or symbol on a menu, it raises consumer awareness, it generates those questions, and we see over time the net benefit. So the penalties for a violation of the law would be $1,000 and up to a year in jail. Any other questions? Anybody hungry? If not, thank you all very much for being here, gentlemen. Thank you for your support, and we'll keep you posted as this bill will be heard in Senate Health Committee this coming Wednesday, and so begins the legislative consideration of this proposal. Thank you very much.